So with this Pokemon Presents, we got a whole new slew of content for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, not the least of which was some pretty promising looking DLC. However, I was perhaps most intrigued by the brief introduction of two brand new Paradox Pokemon, namely the Scarlet Paradox Walking Wake. While I have mixed feelings about Paradox Pokemon as a whole, when I first saw this seemingly prehistoric version of the iconic Suicune, I couldn't help but have a whole lot more opinions and intriguing theories. Let's get into it. Firstly, I should start with the visuals here, which left a whole lot of people feeling polarized, but it poses some interesting implications on its own. A lot of folks were pretty disappointed that Walking Wake does not resemble what we saw with the Scarlet Journals in-game, which seemed to imply that a prior journey to Area Zero led to researchers finding this creature, a paradox amalgamation of all three sacred beasts, not simply Suicune. It's less obvious with the Violet Journal, but it also appears that Iron Leaves has subtle features from all three Swords of Justice members, not just Virizion. I've seen many people disappointed that we didn't get official Paradox versions based on these interesting sketches, but to that I would say two things. One, the language presented alongside those sketches was very deliberate, telling us explicitly that these are imaginary Pokemon, images and forms that came to the artist, entirely inspired by the feelings that other Paradox Pokemon evoked, rather than a specific sketch of anyone in particular. So I'll discuss a bit more about that notion later on, the whole notion of whether these Pokemon are real or not. But it is telling that the artist drew these hybrid paradoxes. Then we did get 1/3 of each of these sketches as its own Paradox Pokemon. Perhaps these are less random occurrences, and more so visions, premonitions, like being in Area Zero allows someone to predict forthcoming Pokemon from other timelines or dimensions. So to those disappointed that we didn't get two full trios in one Pokemon, I would honestly say be patient, because with the DLC, I like the odds of us getting 4 more Paradox Pokemon that can perhaps be hybridized, fused together, to finally get the hybrid paradoxes that we've been reading about for months now. However, for lack of a better term, the existence of Walking Wake alone really is a paradox. We've known for over 2 full decades now the origins of Suicune and the rest of these sacred beasts, one of the only legendary groups with explicitly detailed origins in the Pokemon world. It's said that 150 years prior to the events of Pokemon Gold and Silver, these 3 Pokemon were created by Ho-Oh as original Pokemon, reincarnations of Pokemon that died in the Brass Tower's famous fire. So as far as we know, these Pokemon are one-of-a-kind legends, in essence created using artificial means, sacred magic, at a defined point in time, less than a few human generations ago. By no means would it make sense for Raikou, Entei, and Suicune to have prehistoric ancestors like the proto-mammal, reptilian Walking Wake seems to be, so the very existence of this Pokemon might throw the legend of Ho-Oh into question, and reduce it to, well, a legend, similar to real-life myths that we assign to various animal species, and creation stories about the world as a whole. Perhaps the legendary beasts are regular biological Pokemon that evolved over time, just like any other species, and Walking Wake is indeed a semi-reptilian ancestor to Suicune. However, I don't exactly buy into this theory, since there's an equally competing camp, which would be the reverse, where the story of the beast does stay intact. Suicune created 150 years ago by Ho-Oh, and Walking Wake is not related to Suicune in the traditional sense, much less its prehistoric ancestor from a linear past. This would then throw Area Zero's time machine into question. After all, why is it pulling made-up Pokemon that couldn't possibly have existed in our linear past, rather than true prehistoric ancestors similar to fossil Pokemon? What does this say about the other Paradox Pokemon? Well, this is all really confusing, and perhaps there's a way to reconcile these ideas and preserve the validity of both the legend of Ho-Oh and the technology of Area Zero. Like I was saying earlier with the journals, it's already been given to us as clues that at least some parts of Area Zero are created by imagination. Maybe this machine in this place is so powerful that the Pokemon who are brought to Paldea's crater are not from our past, but from many possible pasts all throughout the multiverse, where infinite possibilities are real, and thus ancient versions of every Pokemon exist somewhere out there. Perhaps someone accessing this machine imagined and then plugged in a search for the vague idea of a Suicune that is prehistoric by our universe's, our Pokemon Earth's, standards of being ancient, visually at least. Thus, Walking Wake was brought to us, a creature that isn't genetic but only vaguely physically similar to Suicune. This is not the ancestor to our Suicune, but perhaps Walking Wake exists in a natural state in a universe, in a timeline, in an alternate Earth where these creatures exist naturally, or did exist naturally for millions of years, rather than as artificial creations of Ho-Oh. If the multiverse is infinite, who says there isn't a reality where this is possible, where you, here on Earth, could use Area Zero's technology to feasibly summon any permutation from the multiverse? To use another pop culture example, think of Spider-Man No Way Home, where these alternate Spider-Man aren't genetically or even physically identical copies of the MCU's Peter Parker from truly parallel universes, where things are exactly the same as the MCU, but rather they were summoned using the vague parameters of Spider-Man, since they fill that vague niche and hold that broad title or descriptor in their own respective universes, even if things are drastically different to the point where a different person entirely is Spider-Man there. You see what I mean? Who's to say we aren't just summoning real Pokemon from an infinite multiverse, from many points in time, and we're just identifying them as ancient versions, since they resemble what we think of as ancient in our world, but perhaps they're contemporary species in their own worlds. I think many of us have had this suspicion for quite some time, and the game makes it somewhat obvious too that this isn't a time machine in the traditional sense. Now Walking Wake all but confirms this theory, and I'm excited to see what other material we get to prove or disprove some of these ideas. What do you think? Thanks to everyone who supports the channel, especially Guardian patron Dayton Wehse. For just a few dollars a month, you can help me produce higher quality content on a more regular basis. All support goes a long way, and the link to join as a patron is right down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for more content.